The show The Boys, there are only a couple superhero groups that we really get to know within the show, but as far as the comics go, there are over 20 superhero groups, and today I'm going to rank and explain all of them. Before I do that, I'd kindly ask if you would like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. 21 at the weakest, we have Super Duper, and the current members on this team are Anti-Sis, the Black Hole, Bobby Bedoin, Kid Camo, Clanker, Ladyfold, and Stool Shadow. Technically, Malchemical was the leader of this group, but he joined super late on, and he dies pretty quickly after joining the group, and I think he would buff this group unfairly. He only joined this superhero team because he got kicked out of a different superhero team that he was much more a part of than this one, so this group is at last because it's mainly made up of members who have some sort of mental disability, and it's more so a support group for those young superheroes with the mental disabilities rather than a superhero team that goes out and saves lives every day. Their background is that they reside in the suburbs of New Jersey, and they're kind of an anomaly in the Boys universe because it's actually made of compassionate and kind young people who want to be superheroes. That being said though, Butcher classifies them as a C-list team with very lackluster powers and not really any feats that are impressive. Their main leader until Malchemical joins is Anti-Sis. She's kind of like the role model and caretaker of most of the members. And as far as Vought goes, they basically stay in the shadows and don't really make any public appearances, and they're never invited to any Vought Corporation events. And in the comics, even Anti-Sis states that the group is pretty sheltered from the outside world. The main plotline they have in the comics also is that Malchemical joins their group, and Billy Butcher basically just takes him out because he starts attacking one of the members of the group, which is another reason why I really don't consider him part of the group, because he was the main antagonist of that group. And outside of Malchemical being on the team, they basically can't really fight anyone, so they're easily sitting at last if you don't count Malchemical as part of their team. And at number 20, we have another pretty weak team, the Sidekick 12. Sidekick 12 are led by O-Father, and the former members are Flameboy, Stepchild, B-Boy, B-Girl, Imp, Baxter, Zippy, Pigeon, Ultralass, E-Ross, Sad Girl, and Fishboy. They're the second to last team because it's basically made up of all young children, and even though they have powers, they're not going to be stronger than anyone else on this list besides Super Duper, who actively can't really use their powers for anything useful. And the tragic part about Sidekick 12 is that they're mainly just abused by O-Father, and their background is that they're kind of a Christian-themed superhero team like the Young Americans. And as far as powers go, we know some of them can fly and some of them can use element abilities. Aside of that, we don't know much on them, and they're children, so they're probably not as powerful as some of the older people on this list. But at number 19, we have Young Americans. So, I know Starlight's in this group, but I put them very low because they're all really young. And Starlight specifically is way weaker in the comics than she is in the TV show, in my opinion. As far as being recruited to the 7 goes, as far as the comics go, it was a complete joke for her to get recruited, which isn't necessarily how it went in the show. And as far as current members go, there's Drummer Boy, General Issue, Holy Mary, and the Standard. And the leader is Drummer Boy and formerly the Standard. They're another superhero team in this universe that is contracted with Vought America, and their public image is considerably more wholesome and less rebellious than that of other teenage groups like the Teenage Kicks. But that was really all a facade, and Starlight was the only member that actually followed those values. And as far as their history goes, the Standard was their initial leader, and they obtained a police scanner and began addressing minor issues such as traffic accidents and bar fights. And then from here, they kind of worked their way up and impressed Vought so much to the point where they reached celebrity status. That earned them comic books, cameos on TV shows, logos, and clothing lines, and their primary focus was disaster relief. While they were working their normal disaster relief duties, Drummer Boy would eventually become team leader at an unknown point, and then Starlight would get recruited to the 7, and once she joined the 7, they kind of chilled out because she was gone, and they kind of went along with the degenerate actions that most of the superhero teams do in The Boys. But the main reason why I put them this low on the list is because they don't really have any combat expertise, and they're not necessarily that strong. They more so just work in disaster relief and helping people rather than trying to harm from bad people. So basically, they're just a pretty weak team. But at number 18, I'm putting G-Coast. As far as members go in G-Coast, their leader is MLK, and the former members are 5x5, Homefry, Too Cool, and then there's 4 other members we don't know the names of. So there's literally no information on this team. We just know they exist, and that it's a super team of adults, which already makes me want to put it higher than the last 3 groups. And they're also a spin-off team of the G-Men, which are a pretty powerful group of soups. But it's all just kind of speculation, and they could probably go anywhere on this list, who knows. I'm just putting them here. And there's also no background, so we can just move on. At number 17, we have G-Wiz. G-Wiz is a group of teens that are basically the pre-G-Men, and eventually later on in their career, they get promoted to G-Men. And as far as members go, they have Airburst, Buzzcut, Dimebag, Discharge, Jetlag, Pinwheel, the dude with no name, and Huey is actually a part of the team technically. As far as teams in the boys go, this group is kind of like the frat boys of superhero teams. Huey actually tries to help them out and save them all because he knows they were taken as a child and kind of just given superpowers but no real world experience. And even though most of the members were super vulgar, they were kind of innocent in another way. And Huey saw that and tried to help them, but it kind of backfired on him, and the boys and G-Wiz get into a brawl, and the boys obviously win. Even though they're somewhat powerful members, they're all super inexperienced and young, which is why I'm putting them in this spot on the list. They have solid superpowers, and there's a bunch of people in the group, but outside of that, they're not anything spectacular. So I think we can move on. At number 16, I have Element Force. Current members are the Divot, Flameburner, Free Flow, and their leader, Airhorn. And their base of operation is Denver, Colorado. Really, all we know about them is that they're a group of heroes with element-based power sets and winners of the award of Best New Team in the latest The Soupy ceremony. I think winning this award gives them a little bit more status than the other teams I've listed so far. But because we know so little about them, I also don't want to put them too high up on the list. So I think they sit pretty comfortably at 16. Number 15, we have the Scorchers. This team consists of Black Thug, Looney Lefty, Ponsing Poof, Sex Vicar, and Team Temptress. As far as their history goes, the Scorchers embodied a more provocative and publicly driven approach, featuring heroes with a focus on themes of sexuality. This is really the only thing the team is notable for, and members of the boys say they're not very powerful outside of Team Temptress and Black Thug. That being said, while not powerful, they're still more powerful than the other teams I've listed so far. This team was made more so for media purposes, and Billy Butcher ends up decapitating all of them and getting rid of them. That being said though, Butcher has some of the strongest powers in the whole comic series, so I'm just keeping them at number 15. Number 14, we have Teenage Kicks. The current members of Teenage Kicks consist of Dognot, Gunpowder, Jet Shriek, Popclaw, Whack Job, and their leader, Big Game. Former members are A-Train, Blarney Cock, and Shoutout. This group was made to adhere to more edgy teens, and they're not as old-fashioned or conservative as the Young Americans. They're also meant to appeal to rebellious teen demographic, and as such, their members tend to be very, very immature, even by soup standards. And sometime before the events of the boys, A-Train is recruited by the Seven from Teenage Kicks, and he replaces Mr. Marathon. The actual comics, though, they're kind of the first antagonistic group that the boys face, and Butcher ends up blackmailing and spying on the team. And the Teenage Kicks end up actually fighting back and getting into a big brawl where Huey, with his new superpowers, accidentally punches a hole in Blarney Cock. And after this big brawl, they pretty much stay out of the ways of the boys for the rest of the series. And as far as powers go, they're pretty strong and confident enough to take on the boys, but they're still a younger group. But out of all the young groups, they seem like the strongest, even though they're the most immature. So they're pretty much sitting in near the middle of the list at number 14. At number 13, we have G-Style. So G-Style is another group that is a part of the bigger overall G-Men team. And all we know about them is that they're on the same level as G-Force, which is the main team that sits below G-Men. We know G-Force are pretty powerful, and if they're equal to that team, then I'm just putting them here. But next up at number 12 on our list is G-Force. Luckily, we know a little bit more about G-Force, and their main leader is Cold Snap, and the former members are Europo, Flamer, Luckless, Puss Puss, and Stacker. They were the original spin-off team to the G-Men, and they were founded by a man named John Godolkin sometime after 1984. Godolkin basically stole or created his own Compound V and secured a deal with Vought America, which allowed them full rights to marketing, but that was only if the company allowed him to kind of keep his teams more independent from other superhero groups. Just like all the other G-Men groups, these kids were basically stolen off the streets and sexually abused by John Godolkin. And this group pretty much ends when, like all the other G groups, they're completely decimated because Vought America deems Godolkin as a relations liability, and there's a bunch of heavily armored vehicles dispatched on their mansion and they get gunned down pretty much. As far as members though, they were all pretty powerful superheroes, kind of B-list soups, I guess you'd consider them. And as far as powers go, it basically consists of kind of the lesser groups in X-Men's powers, like teleportation, fire abilities, freeze abilities, etc. But at number 11, I'm putting the Children of Stormfront. The Children of Stormfront consist of Vicar, Norska, Scandia, and then 3 unnamed male members. And this group was a group of mythology-themed superheroes composed by Slavic or Germanic soups, and its members are not actually related to Stormfront at all, and had simply been grouped up together by Vought, likely for marketing purposes. As far as when we see them in the comics, they end up trying to attack Butcher and the boys. And like most of the soups in the comics, Butcher ends up taking them down and taking them out. As far as powers and abilities go, we really only know about Vicor, but we know he is actually pretty powerful. As far as individually goes, I'd say he's one of the most powerful soups on the list that we know of. That kind of pretty much carries this list though, because we don't really know anything else about group, besides that they get taken out by Butcher. So we can move on. At number 10, we have the Avenging Squad. The Avenging Squad consists of the Buzzer, the original Crimson Countess, Eagle the Archer, the original Ladio, Manbot, and the Steel Knight, and then their leader Soldier Boy. This group was the predecessor to Payback, and this was Vought America's earliest attempt at creating superheroes. They were also the company's first attempt at introducing superhumans for the United States military, which is a goal that they didn't even achieve within the actual comic series. Their downfall was that they were highly untrained and inept, so they all just got wiped out during the end of World War II. But as far as powers go, they're basically the weaker version of Payback, which I'm going to get into later on this list. So I'm just going to move on to number 9, which is Fantastico. So Fantastico's current members are Reacher Dick, Invisilass, an unnamed 4th member, and their former member is the Doofer. As you can probably tell by the name in the picture, they're based off the Fantastic Four from Marvel, and their powers basically consist of the same as in the Fantastic Four. This superhero group also doubles as a music band, which is pretty sick. And as far as their comic appearance goes, the Doofer meets a tragic end at the hands of Billy Butcher later on in the comics. And even though we don't have that much info on them, I'm putting them this high because they're based on the Fantastic Four, and it seems like they have a pretty similar spot in that universe that the Fantastic Four does. And that alone makes me feel pretty good ranking them at 9. At number 8 though, we have Mavericks. So we actually don't know the name of 7 of the members, and we only know 1 member, which is Tech Knight. And as far as their history goes, they were actually a pretty powerful superhero group, but then their leader Tech Knight left to go to Payback, and they kind of fall off. Even though we don't know necessarily how strong anyone on that team is besides Tech Knight, Jack from Jupiter was about to get kicked from the 7, and Stillwell mentioned that a member of the Mavericks could potentially take his place. which I guess you could say Starlight was recruited, but that was purely as a joke, and this was a pretty serious pick for a member of the Seven. It's presumed that most of the members were killed at the end of the coup in the series, and in the comics they were also beaten up by the boys because they were doing criminal acts, and that's really all we have on them. But at number 7, I have True. So True consists of 11 unnamed members, and then their other member is the Deep. So the Deep is actually pretty powerful in the comics, and he's probably one of the most underrated supes in the whole comic universe of the boys. And there's also 11 other superheroes that, even though we don't know them, we know they have superpowers and we know they're adults. So we know this team is going to be somewhat powerful, even though it's pretty mysterious. This group also was formed from James Stillwell trying to make another American superhero group, and it just didn't work out pretty much, is all we know. This was a real team though, even if for a short amount of time, and it would have been a pretty powerful team if they were around during the comics. But there's really not much more to say about them, so at number 6 we have Glorious 5-Year Plan. So Glorious 5-Year Plan is a defunct team of superheroes that existed in the Soviet Union. This team consists of Collectivo, Purge, Red Banner, the Tractor, and their leader, Love Sausage. Love Sausage is also a member of the boys, and we know he's very, very powerful. Another one of the strongest supes in the whole series. I'd say probably stronger than the Deep. So even though we don't really know about any of the other members, I think he carries this group ahead of the rest of the groups on the list so far. And how he dies in the actual comics is he gets killed by Butcher himself with an RPG, while Butcher is on his evil rampage at the end of the series. We also know Love Sausage had a lot of respect and a positive regard for his fellow teammates on this team. Outside of that, all we know is this is a pretty mysterious but powerful team in the boys universe. At number 5, we have Team Titanic. This team's current members are Jimmy the One, Gum Chum, and the Starlight. And as far as former members go, there was Country Mama Dry Hump, Earl Mulch, Mal Chemical, Muzzletov, Regina Dentata, and Snappletwat. So on his own, we know Mal Chemical is very strong, even though Butcher just takes him down like he does to every soup on this list. Also, the rest of the group actually gets in a brawl with the boys, and some of them live to tell the tale. This team basically recruits the supes that don't really fit into other groups, such as Jimmy the One, who is a much older guy with a dad bod. Unfortunately, as far as strength goes, they're a very powerful team that has a very low status in this universe. So even though they get taken out by the boys pretty easily, they're still gonna sit at number 5 on this list. At number 4, we have G-Men. So the main G-Men's leader is John Godolkin and Five-O, and the former members are Silver Kincaid, Nubia, Groundhawk, Critter, The Divine, Cold Snap, Putzpuss, Stacker, and Europo. Now, most of these members kind of overlap with some of the other G groups I've listed, but that's because they rank up over time and get to join the main G-Men team after they've been in the G group for a while. So as far as background goes, like I said, John Godolkin created this group in about 1984 with Compound V, or his own formula of Compound V. And this group is basically a complete ripoff of the X-Men with a much darker origin, with John Godolkin being a very, very bad guy. The G-Men were introduced to the world and marketed as orphans, rebels, and outcasts that had been rejected by society due to their powers, but had been taken in by Godolkin, who ends up raising them as his own children and now fight to protect a world that persecutes them, even though, according to Huey, practically all of them are millionaires and live luxurious lifestyles. And Huey even jokes in the series that the only time they struggle in anything is when they have to bail themselves out of jail. But this fake backstory that Godolkin made was a hit with the public, and they became one of the biggest superhero groups ever. But the real dark backstory to this group is that it's basically a sex cult of kidnapped children. And that's as far as I want to get into that, but all that kidnapping led to smaller groups and spin-off groups such as the G-Force or G-Style or or G-Coast. Even Vought finds Godolkin's actions so disgusting that Vought ends up massacring the whole entire group because they realized they couldn't afford the risk of the increasing instability of the G-Men any longer. So literally every single member of G-Men gets wiped out, but they were one of the strongest superhero groups in the boys universe before they got wiped out. At number 3 though, we have Payback. And as far as members of Payback go, there is the new Crimson Countess, the new Eagle the Archer, Mindroid, the new Soldier Boy, Stormfront, Swatto, and Tech Knight. And as far as powers in the main Vought superhero groups, they are only second to the Seven in terms of popularity and actual capability. And as we saw earlier, they were originally created as the Avenging Squad by Vought as a field trials for soup and actual war combat. And after the original Avenging Squad gets wiped out, they get replaced by these new members, and they were the first very popular group for Vought that they created. As far as the role they play in the comics though, Payback ends up trying to fight the boys, and Butcher almost single-handedly takes all of them down. The one truly impressive feat though I can give credit to Payback for is Stormfront actually gets in a fight with the female and ends up only getting his eye ripped out, which is pretty impressive considering the female basically kills every other person they fight in the series. And then also we just have the general knowledge that they're second to the Seven, so it makes it pretty easy to put them this high on the list. And at second, we have the boys. The boys consist of their leader Billy Butcher and Greg Mallory, and then their associates are Old Legend, Greg Mallory, Love Sausage, and the former members are Huey Campbell, Billy Butcher, Mother's Milk, the Frenchman, the female, and Greg Mallory. So the boys are the main protagonist of this comic, and they are a government-sponsored group of superhuman watchdogs tasked with policing, monitoring, and potentially stopping corrupt superheroes. To not make this video 5 hours long, I'm just gonna give a short explanation of kind of each character that is a part of the boys group. So first we have Billy Butcher, who is an ultra-violent Englishman and ex-Royal Marine, and his wife was assaulted and indirectly killed by a soup. After this, he pretty much seeks out vengeance, and he kind of gets help from Mallory in creating the group The Boys. Next is Mother's Milk, who is a New Yorker whose mother was accidentally exposed to Compound V through workplace contamination, which caused both of her sons to be born with Compound V altered DNA. He has one of the most tragic backgrounds in the whole series because his brother, who wears a football helmet, has his powers manifest at a very bad time, and it literally crushes his skull to death. And then MM ends up joining the US Army Rangers, and while boxing, his powers manifest and he accidentally kills his opponent. And then he's in military prison and he gets approached by Billy Butcher, who recruits him to the boys. Next we have the female, who is a Japanese girl whose mother worked as a secretary at a company attempting to create a copy of Compound V. And her mom used to take her to her work, and there's the bucket of this experimental drug, and the female ends up taking it all. To maintain the work though, scientists end up kidnapping her and pretty much keeping her caged up, and all this pretty much led her to end up being really emotionally disturbed and selectively mute. She eventually escapes the researchers and scientists, and she gets found by the boys where she's knocked out by a gas grenade. Then we have the Frenchman, who, believe it or not, is French, and he's the only one that's able to touch the female without incurring serious bodily harm. And last, we have Huey, who is a Scotsman whose girlfriend was killed by A-Train when A-Train threw a villain through her body. He is left pretty traumatized by this, and Butcher uses this to recruit him to the boys. Now, as far as Compound V goes that the boys have, all we know is that the Compound V they take makes them stronger than 4 out of 5 soups. Or at least the Compound V that Frenchie, Huey, and Butcher take. That alone makes them really powerful, but they also have a lot of combat expertise that most of the soups in the series lack, which makes them pretty much stronger than every group in the series outside of the Seven. And speaking of the Seven, at number 1 we have the Seven. The Seven consist of their leader Homelander, and then the former members are Starlight, the Deep, Queen Maeve, Black Noir, A-Train, Jack from Jupiter, Lamplighter, and Mr. Marathon. The Seven are basically the perfected formula of Compound V put into soups. So basically all the members that have this Compound V that are original members are the strongest soups in the whole boys universe, factually speaking. So even if they lack the combat expertise that the boys do, they're still just more powerful in general, even though most of the members would get beat in a fight against the boys, but not all of them. What makes this group the strongest is just Homelander and Black Noir. They are objectively the strongest superheroes in the whole entire series, even counting Butcher, even counting Frenchman, even counting Huey. And throughout the series, there is kind of a will they, won't they, and whether the boys and the Seven are gonna fight. And neither team wants to fight each other because they both know they'd get almost completely wiped out. But I think it's specifically Butcher that states it, that they would probably lose if they fought the Seven because of Homelander, and then later on Black Noir. Because Butcher was not capable of taking out Homelander. The only person capable of taking out Homelander was Black Noir, and the only person that was capable of taking out Black Noir was Homelander. Or as far as Black Noir goes, getting taken out after he's pretty much killed by Homelander already. So just these two are basically why this is the #1 spot on the list. Otherwise, I think every member of the boys is stronger than everyone else in the Seven. And it's kind of funny because in the comics, they don't actually do that much fighting because they're kind of just waiting for everything to break loose, which does happen at the end of the series. But we know they're the strongest VOD America group, and I could see why you'd think the boys might be stronger, but I think it's pretty safe to say that they're #1 on this list. And that's pretty much all for the video. If you've gotten this far, comment any video recommendations, not just on the boys, but anything in general that involves TV or comics or movies that you want me to talk about. And just thanks for watching.